Hey, All-Star here, and welcome to another video. So today I figured I'd show you guys some train footage with me talking over it and do another Q&A that I've been meaning to do for about 2 years now. So the first Q&A I did for my 1-year anniversary when I first got hired, and now it's 3.5 years in, so time's passed relatively quickly. Things are getting busier, and of course with things opening up again, there's no better time to do one of these. So I got plenty of questions to answer, and so with train footage running in the background and cutaways when appropriate to the questions so that you'll be able to see them, as I cannot put them picture within picture for some reason. Here we go. First question. So our first question comes from Blaze06, and it reads, if you had the chance, would you take the office car special for a joyride? And other than that, would you say the recent derailments are sabotages? That's an interesting question. So the first part of that, would I take the CSX office car special for a joyride? Kind of funny considering that the footage running in the background is from Norfolk Southern, but I would, if I had the opportunity, yes, I'd be honored to take the office car special as a crew member. Probably not by myself, but I'd very much be honored to take it as a crew member. I've gotten to work the family days, so I have a little bit of experience doing a little bit of passenger runs. Have worked a couple work trains as of recent, so we've gone passenger speed a few times, not very often, considering I mostly run freight. But if I wanted to and had the opportunity, absolutely, I would take the office car special as a conductor, for sure. And as for that second part of the question, are the derailments, a lot of the derailments at least, have they all been sabotages? And the answer to that is no. And the reason for that is that as infrastructure ages and the rails have, and as the carriers at least have neglected maintenance, things like that happen. And as for East Palestine in particular, which is, I imagine, the incident that you're referring to, that was most definitely an accident, as well. When you neglect maintenance, that's what happens. And when it happened, the car that went off the rails hadn't been inspected for several months, and Norfolk Southern had decreased the time of their car inspections from about 5 minutes to 30 seconds. So all in all, it's all been accidental, really. It's the fault of the carriers. It's just what happens when you cut and don't replace anything and don't fix anything. So all in all, good question, and let's go to the next one. Our next question is going to be a cutaway, and it comes from Darwayne Frost and reads, how many foreign power engines have you operated, and which I guess is your favorite? And going along with that, I'm going to cheat here and include another one, also in a cutaway, and it's from John Valenta. And it is, what foreign power engines have you operated? And I've seen them all. So that's actually a pretty easy question. Which one's my favorite? I'd have to say Canadian National, bar none, because they have microwaves, they have hot plates, and the seats are really comfortable. As for what kind of foreign power I've operated, pretty much everything under the sun except for Ferromex and for Kansas City Southern. I haven't had Kansas City Southern yet, or Ferromex for that matter, but they're basically the same engines, just reskinned. Everything else, though, is pretty standard. Norfolk Southern is probably the least comfortable I've had, and like I said, CN is probably my favorite. Particularly the new engines, the Tier 4s are very nice from CN, but I've had BNSF many times. I've had Union Pacific a few. Union Pacific's actually not bad, but their radio setup is really strange. They don't actually have a handset. They have like a kind of like a trucker mic almost, just attached to the wall radio, and it's really bizarre. But as for foreign power, yeah, I've had CP, I've had CN, I've had BNSF, I've had UP, I've had Norfolk Southern, and of course I've had CSX. And as for other stranger engines I've had City Rail, ex-City Rail engines, and I've had maybe a couple leasers here and there, maybe a CEFX or a CITX, one of the blue and whites. I've had one of those maybe once or twice. But other than that, yeah, I've had basically everything. I've even had war bonnets. I've had several in the 4700 series and several in the 700 series from BNSF. So yeah, that's the general condensed version of that. And again, which one is my favorite Canadian national has to be that by far. Next question is from a very familiar face, and it's from Philip Lee, and it reads, "Hey, congrats. How does it feel, and is it fun? How do you like working for a Class 1?" So, the condensed version of how do I like working for a Class 1? It's like any other job. You have bad days, you have good days, and most days are just average. The long version of that is I actually don't mind it as much. It's probably the best job I've ever had, in that I don't have to deal with people on a normal basis. I don't have to deal with the public, which is always great. I hate dealing with the public because you can't ever make people happy. That's just a general rule of customer service and food service in general, which is what I did before I worked on the railroad. And so as a railroader, I actually don't mind it because I don't have to deal with people very, very often. And the people that I deal with are usually just bosses or management or yard masters, maybe, like I said, the occasional boss, and of course my engineer and maybe a trainee. So other than those select few people, I don't have to deal with very many. And all the people that I've dealt with, I actually don't mind or like to deal with. So all in all, it's actually not bad. And like I said, when things go badly on the railroad, it's a long day. It makes for a very, very long day. Some days can be longer than 15 hours. Some days can be just absolute slogs of days where you just don't do anything for hours and hours at a time, or where you might have to just do busy work for the entire day and it sucks. And then you just go home and you're tired and you're like, ugh. Then you go out like 10 hours later and you're just pulling your hair out trying to figure out how you're going to get rest. And those days just stink. But the good days where you have like 5-hour days, 6-hour days where you just get on, get off, those exist too, and they're really nice, and they break things up. And no 2 days on the railroad are really ever truly exactly the same. Some days you make it in faster time, some days you just don't make it there at all even. So no matter what, you kind of go with the flow and you don't expect anything. You hope for the best, but you expect nothing. You don't even expect the worst. You just expect nothing. And if you go out there not expecting anything to happen, then you won't be surprised when things go badly, and you'll be pleasantly happy when things go great. So the short answer, like I said, is you have good days and bad days, and most days are average. And the long version is, well, just a longer version of that. So all in all, I'm pretty happy working for the railroad right now, at least in my limited 3 years, and hopefully I'll continue to have a safe and successful career. This next question is one of my favorites, and it comes from Racer9, and it reads, for the question and answer, how do you manage your time when you're on call, and how do you manage to sleep? So managing time is a big thing. You basically get stuff done when you can. On my rest days, those are basically just spent doing work. So basically just cleaning up the apartment, maybe doing laundry, maybe getting groceries, I don't know, just doing stuff, just getting business done is what I do on my rest days mostly. When I have time, when I have extra time, I might just, like, I don't know, play Magic, play Team Fortress 2, do something to kill time in between calls if I have time, which I sometimes do, sometimes I don't. Just depends on how busy things are. As for sleep schedule is kind of interesting. So when you're not working on call, you're usually sleeping, because if you're like me and watch the board, you usually know about when you're going to go out. So you time your naps and you time your sleep roughly between when you think you're not going to get called. So if you don't think you're going to get called for a day, then you'll stay up for a little bit, then sleep for probably about 8 hours, then stay up, maybe take a nap, and then get called. If you're thinking you're going to get called in 10 hours, then you just go right to sleep, and you basically just keep the phone on high ring until it goes off. So in all, time management's a big thing. On rest days, like I said, you get a lot done, especially Conductors only get one. We're available 6 by 1, which is really obnoxious. Engineers don't know how the heck we do it, but 6 for 1 is how conductors usually operate. And sometimes you get a day here and there in between your calls to maybe get something done, maybe get some laundry done, maybe get some groceries, maybe, like I said, clean up around the house. But usually you're just stuck. When you're not working, you're sleeping, and when you're not sleeping, you're waiting for your phone to ring, and that's usually just napping, doing whatever. And then, of course, on your rest day, I use that at least for business. So, and I plan my rest day on a day that I know that I'll have something to do, so like a doctor's appointment or some sort of business venture or whatever. So that's usually how things work out, and it all comes down to making the schedule, or lack therein, work for you, and eventually you learn how to do it, and you learn pretty fast how to do it, actually. So like I said, all in all, it's just it's a fine balancing act of working just enough to pay bills and taking time for yourself and doing what needs to be done. Next question comes from my cousin Tori, and it reads, is conducting a train anything like the Polar Express? And so proud of you on your first anniversary and all that good stuff. So, is being a conductor anything like the Polar Express? Considering that I don't deal with passengers, not really. I'm mostly, when I'm not on the ground yelling at my engineer to go forwards, backwards, and stop, I'm in the seat next to him, across the cab, telling him what to do, relaying orders from the dispatcher, writing down work authorities and what kind of things that they have us doing, like maybe slowing down or stopping at whatever mile pole and calling them before we have to proceed. Basically just being a glorified note taker and order giver. So being a conductor on a freight train is actually very different than what it's like on a passenger train. Passenger conductors, or at least the ticket people in the cars, they take tickets, they do a lot of just looking around and making sure passengers are doing what they're supposed to and not making a mess of everything, or just making sure that people are being safe and people are using common sense. On a freight train, the conductor does a lot of groundwork. So you're on the ground, you're with a radio, you're on the ground with a radio, and when you're not on the ground, you're riding a car or you're in the engine, and on the ground, you tell your engineer what to do. You're your engineer's eyes and ears on the ground, and you control movements. So you tell your engineer to go forward however many cars you want, or come back however many cars you want, or stop whenever you need to stop. And usually you have a list of all the cars in your train, and you keep track of what's in everything. Everything going past you, you should know what's in it and whether or not it's dangerous. You should know you should know who it's billed to. You should know who it's billed from. You should know where it's going. You should know if it's supposed to go with you in the first place. So all that good stuff is part of being a conductor, at least in the freight industry. And knowing all those things comes with a lot of practice and a little bit of experience, and just being on the rails for more than a year and a half. So as long as you got all that stuff straight, you'll be fine as a freight conductor. Just make sure to use common sense. If something looks off, stop the move and tell somebody. So if something is not in your train that should be there, tell somebody. And if something is in your train that's not supposed to be in your train, tell somebody. So like if you have an extra car, definitely let somebody know. If you have a car missing, definitely let somebody know. And if cars are out of order, definitely let someone know. So basically the rule of thumb as a conductor is if something's wrong, tell someone. And when you're in the engine, if something's off, let your engineer know, and you and your engineer can then tell the dispatcher, who is your boss when you're on the road, what's going on, whether you need to stop and inspect something, or whether they should expect to have something pop up that shouldn't pop up. So if something happens unexpected, the dispatcher knows what to do and can plan for it. And so that's really what being a conductor is all about, is just knowing what to do when things go south. And just knowing everything about your train. That's really the gist of being a freight conductor versus being a passenger conductor. And really, it comes with a lot of time on the job, and it comes with a lot of just learning how things are done. But eventually, like I said in my last question, you make it work for you, and you find a way of doing it that works for you, and you stick to it. The next question comes from Trains of the World, and it reads, how long can freight trains be? And so that's actually a pretty simple question. The long answer to that is, well, it depends. And the short answer to that question is they can be pretty long, or depending on what they're carrying, not very long at all. So about the average length of your normal freight train is about 1 mile to 1.5 miles long, but the long answer to that, as I said before, it depends. So the network restriction for CSX is 12,000 feet long for mixed freight trains with distributed power, and without distributed power, so engines in the middle or rear of the train, the limit is about 10,000 feet. And it's also weight restricted, so if your train is heavier than 14,000 tons, you also need distributed power, and mixed freight trains can also go up to 20,000 tons. So I guess how long can they be? Max of 20,000 tons and 12,000 feet. 12,000 feet and 20,000 tons for CSX mixed freight trains. And that's actually very, very long. That usually comes out to around 190, sometimes over 200 cars, and a lot of weight. So 20,000 tons is quite heavy for a mixed freight train. And of course, trains can get longer depending on the type of train. Auto rack trains can get longer, intermodal trains can get longer. So auto rack trains, the max length for an auto rack train is about 14,000 feet. Same thing for your intermodal trains. Intermodal trains, if you have distributed power, can get up to 16,000 feet. So you can get pretty long. 16,000 feet is over 3 miles long if you're doing the math. So 3 miles long is about as long as a train is allowed to get on CSX. So that's the long answer to the question. But again, it depends on what you're carrying, and it depends on how much you need to carry. Some trains, you'll have really long but really light trains where most of the cars are empty, and some trains you'll have really short and really heavy trains like coal trains or ethanol or grain trains. So depending on how big and how heavy and how long is really, it depends on how big, how heavy, and how long you are, and how much of whatever you're carrying needs to be carried. So if you're a long coal train, you can be up to 200 cars long and 10,500 feet long, and sometimes over 28,000 tons. So that's pretty big, all things considered, for any train. 30,000 tons is quite a lot of weight. So if you're doing the math, that's around 30,000 tons, around 6 million pounds. So yeah, trains can get quite long. So the last question of the day comes from a good friend of mine, Evan Wolf, and it is, what is the coolest non-train related thing you've done or seen while on the road for work? And so that question's actually kind of funny because a lot of the stuff that happens on the road is work related, but very so often you do have the funny things that you might do. I think one of the best stories I have actually of that, we got stopped at Point of Rocks on our way to Baltimore, which is about the halfway mark, and so we got stopped, and where we got stopped across the road actually is what used to be a deli, which has changed hands 2 or 3 times in the last several years. And so said ex-deli, now owned by these people, the deli itself used to be very good. It used to have basically everything from chicken wings to burgers to pizza to you name it, they probably had it. And now the people that own it have reduced the menu to 7 items. And so I went in to explore the deli because I was hungry, and we got stopped there and asked the dispatcher how long we were gonna sit there for, and the answer was, well, you're waiting on an Amtrak train that hasn't left the station yet. And so my engineer and I look at each other, and I said, well, I guess it's going to be a while, so I'm going to go get dinner. And he goes, okay, I'll let you know if I want anything. And I was like, all right, take my radio, and if you got $15, I'll take your $15. He's like, okay. He gives me $15, and I get off the engine, I go across the street, and I go to the place. And this deli, like I said, it used to have everything, and now it only has 7 things on the menu, and they're all rice bowls, and none of them are good. And like, none of them sound good. And I get on the radio, and I say, "Hey, Mike," my engineer's name was Mike, and I was like, "Hey, Mike, what do you want?" And he's like, "What do they have?" And I was like, "Well, it's a lot of rice bowls and not much else." He's like, "Is there anything with like meat or like beef or chicken or anything?" And I'm like, "Well, let me look." And so I take like a 5-minute glance, and the closest thing is some halal chicken and rice bowl. I say, "It's some Middle Eastern chicken and rice bowl." And he goes, "Oh, I think I'll pass." So that's what I ended up ordering, actually. I ended up ordering that chicken and rice bowl thing, and it ended up costing like $13 for some ungodly reason, without a drink, by the way. The drink was $2, so I ended up spending 15 of my own dollars to get some food that was I'll get to that in a second. So I leave the restaurant, turn my radio off, leave the restaurant. As I'm crossing the street, Dad and his kids come up, and the kids are all excited. They're like, "Oh my gosh, did you come from the train?" I'm like, yes, I came from the train," and all that good stuff. And the kids are like, "Oh, what's in the bag?" And I was like, "It's my dinner." And Dad laughs, and he's like, "Yeah, see, even they have to eat too." And so we all had a good laugh. And Dad's like, "So what are you guys hauling?" I'm like, "Oh, just 130 loads of coal for Baltimore." He's like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Yeah, about average length of train, 130 cars, 6,200 feet. It's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." So I was like, "All right, yeah, we're going to be sitting here for a while, so so yeah, what better time to go get dinner?" And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds pretty cool." And so after chatting for a little bit, I got back up in the engine and start digging into the food. And Mike looks over and he goes, "So, how is it?" And I pause for about 10 seconds and say, "If you're really hungry, it's okay." And he goes, "Oh, that's pretty bad." And so I laugh, and so we laugh, and I'm like, "Yeah, no, not gonna eat there again." So that's probably the best sort of not work related, well, at work story that I have, is getting food at a place that used to be really good but ended up actually turning out to be really terrible. So all in all, was a fun experience, but not one that I'm exactly looking to repeat. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Q&A and listening along as I've answered the questions that you guys have put to me. So as I let the last of these trains play, which is the longest train that I've ever seen, 271 car train through Latrobe, just wanted to let you know, thank you all for the support throughout these 3.5 years. It means a lot. Thanks for sticking with me. And I know I haven't uploaded in a while. Things have been busy. Just work's been kind of hectic now that things are starting to pick up again. So thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for all the support. And if you like what you see, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as 39G in the background plays, I think I'll say goodbye here. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for stopping by.